It is one of the storied World Cup rivalries, and when they come together, Australia and South Africa, they write stories and they etch memories that last us a lifetime. It is a game that is worth being excited about, given how South Africa have started, given what South Africa have done to Australia in recent times, and they finally broke a bit of a hoodoo 4 years ago in what was otherwise a disappointing World Cup. Australia, on the other hand, they got it wrong against India. They are not a team that get it wrong in this format, in this tournament. So, Australia versus South Africa is where our attention lies on Maruti Suzuki Arena presents ESPN Cricket for Matchday. It's a very good afternoon to Anil Kumble, who today has the job of playing referee, umpire.
Yes.
Being a neutral.
Yes. Really looking forward to doing that. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a good game, so looking forward to it.
Dale Steyn, you are forgiven for not being the objective analyst that you've done such a good job of being in these last 2 weeks or so today.
I'll try not to be too biased, but I think it's going to be a good game either way. You know, Australia in World Cups and South Africa with their recent form. It's going to be a good one.
Yeah, it pains me to say a good thing about him, but if you want to learn true objectivity and remove the partisanship and the jingoism and whatnot, no one better than Tom Moody. So let me welcome him as well. You know, I mean it with all my heart and respect. He's a double World Cup winner. He has made sure South Africa stumble just at the right time. But right now, he is nothing more than an objective analyst, not someone who's rooting for the Aussies. Are you, Tom?
Not at all. Not at all. Not that we need it either.
And on that note, shots have been fired. But is this a different Australia-South Africa fixture? Do they go into this brimming with serious confidence, almost like, yeah, today we're going to brush the Aussies aside, or now we can really sort of take it to the Aussies today with what we've seen?
Yeah, I think South Africa will walk into this game feeling like confident. There's a lot of good things that are happening in the South African camp. The top six have been in the runs of late. The last game we saw them, three of them get hundreds in the recent series against Australia. They won that one and they came back from being 2-0 down to winning 3 in a row to win that series, which is a great achievement. As often you kind of think to yourself, well, you know, playing against Australia, they'll just close it out. And they were able to do that, so that was good. And then for Australia, from their point, you know, they lost the series in South Africa. They came to India. They lost to India, and then they've lost their first game in the World Cup. So, you know, contrasting in terms of confidence, but skill-wise, both teams are neck and neck. They, in my book, they're on the same page. They're very similar. But when it comes to World Cups and the occasions, South Africa have the wood. Australia have the wood over South Africa in that. So it's those kind of battles that I'm going to be interested to see how they play out today.
Yeah, high skill game, something we can expect today?
Yes, conditions are unknown, so yes, you certainly need good skills to sort of counter that. I mean, if it's going to be a good surface, then it sort of evens out the battle, but otherwise good skills needed. More importantly, you'll also need some tactics and strategies, so we'll have to see how both these teams go about, because if the surface is challenging, then you certainly need some strategy and tactics as well.
All right, now as it turns out, with the unknowns that we know of, Tom, we know that it's a different bit of work that's been done to the Lucknow ground. Curator was sacked and whatnot. There's a relayed surface. Pat Cummins said it could offer pace and bounce yesterday. Okay, you can tell me more about that, because he's won the toss and he's bowling first.
Well, I think he's bowling first mainly because he just doesn't know what to expect. So he's going to throw the ball into South Africa's hands and say, well, you tell us what this surface is worth, how many runs can you get? And quite often when you're put in that position, you can find yourself going a little bit too hard too early without really sort of understanding the nuances of a particular wicket. I think, to be fair, I think if there is pace and bounce, that suits both teams, because both teams match up very similarly with pace bowling. But I think it's just going to come down to sort of judgment of the conditions, who's going to assess those conditions quickly, and who's going to be able to make that competitive total, with the pressures, that surround this contest.
And this is, like I said, this is more than just about the game that we're going to have today. It's just going to be an added chapter to what's already a terrific tale of South Africa-Australia contest, especially in this format, especially in this tournament. In fact, we did a poll building up to the World Cup of the greatest ever one-day internationals, and it should come as no surprise that Australia and South Africa contests feature twice in the top 3. Let's go back in time before we get teams and whatnot and just relive some of those rivalries. And Tom Moody was terrific at his storytelling with 87. Let me go a little further now. In 1999, it's a game that needs, I guess, no real recollection. We remember it as clear as it was just recently. 213, tied game, tied result would mean Australia go through to the final to win what would have been for the first of their 3 consecutive World Cups, and that very run out at the end. Tom Moody was in that 11 in what turned out to be an unforgettable game. Tom, good memories?
Yeah, an amazing cricket match, that one. It just seesawed from really the get-go throughout the whole day. It was in our hands. Then South Africa, took control, and it seemed to switch hands every sort of 30 or 40 minutes. So no one really had control. And a game that was on a surface at Edgbaston that was quite a difficult, slowish surface, so it wasn't easy to bat on. Well, that's my excuse for getting no runs. But it was an incredible match, and the thing that really stood out, there's 2 things that stood out for me in that match. One was the brilliance of the late great Shane Warne, and the way he bowled was just quite extraordinary. Like you'd expect any champion, when the moment arises, they step up to the plate, and it's exactly what Shane Warne did. And the second thing that stood out was Lance Klusener at the end, and just how brutally hard he hit the ball. I remember that last over that Damien Fleming bowled. I was at deep cover. One ball off the bat was, I reckon, to my left-hand side, probably no more than 5 metres off the bat, and then it just hit the pickets before I even had a chance to take my second step. It was hit that hard. And the very next ball, one went past Mark Waugh at deep mid-off, exactly the same. It was only just to his right side. It was brutal the way he was batting in that tournament, and somehow South Africa stumbled at the very end. That man in the picture, Alan Donald, being run out with Klusener right at the end.
Where was 16-year-old Dale Steyn when this game happened? Does he remember?
I was in hostel actually, and I remember I can't remember what night it was. It was a weekday, is what I can remember, and there was a little TV that we had, and we were actually the game was happening during study time. So the guys were running in and out of this little room, all trying to watch, and then getting screamed at by the teachers to go back to the rooms to study. I was just a young man at the time, and then when we lost, or when it got down to that last over, actually, there was almost everyone was in this little room watching off this little TV, and it was mortifying when when there was a tie, because no one could sleep. There was young boys that absolutely loved the game. Some of them were crying, so it affected everyone all around the world. Essentially, I was in a small hostel in Zanin. No one even knows where this place is. And kids were crying about this. So yeah, I can remember it well.
Oh my God, India must have just come back with you after the Super Sixes disappointment, but you remember sort of following this outstanding game?
Of course. I mean, South Africa and India played the first game, and we lost to South Africa, where again, Lance Klusener sort of took the game away from us. Him and Boucher, I thought, towards the end, got some quick runs, and that sort of put pressure on us to get those runs. So Klusener had a brilliant tournament, and this was one where just that moment where you sort of freeze, pressure, but you feel for South Africa. They had a wonderful tournament throughout the World Cup, and yes, I certainly remember Shane Warne going through the batting lineup, not just in the semi-final, but also in the final.
Yeah, my good friend Daryl Cullinan over a beverage a few years ago, Tom mentioned that, we were unlucky in that game because David Shepherd gave Hansie Cronje out of the boot to Shane Warne, and that's what turned everything. In the DRS era, might have been different.
Of course. Of course, there's always just one-sided when it comes to those dodgy decisions. But yeah, I must admit, it was probably closer to the boot than it was the bat, but we'll take it. You may recall that last over as well with that run out, Damien Fleming rolling the ball along the ground to Adam Gilchrist to execute the run out, and it was quite interesting. The week before, we had a team event at a 10-pin bowling alley, and we all think that that preparation of our 10-pin bowling was very much critical to that run out, just to make sure his underarm didn't go over Gilly's head. He just rolled it along the pitch to make sure it got there safely.
Yeah, that's brilliant, because it is, if you come to think of it now, in any other situation, I can't remember anyone else rolling it all along the ground to execute a run out. Just make sure no chance of a miss. And the fact that Damon Fleming had the presence of mind then could have been the difference. Poor old Alan Donald, he was warned the previous ball. He was nearly run out of the previous ball. Oh. Right, that was just one of the three great Australia-South Africa games that we enjoyed reliving. And we will come to the other one a little while from now. No points for guessing. It doesn't feature in a World Cup, but it is arguably the greatest ever ODI until maybe the 2019 World Cup final. But let's just go to teams, since that's important, and it gives us an indication on what both Pat Cummins and Themba Bavuma make of the surface at Lucknow. So let's have a look at the Australian team first. And Anil Kumble called for one important change. If you saw that, it was only about tactics, but they decided that that's enough for Alex Carey, who did put in a score in the series that these two played before the World Cup, but outside of one innings, he struggled as Alex Carey, and he misses out after having been among the runs even the last time these two played in a World Cup 4 years ago. Josh Inglis will play his first game, and on the other side of things, it's a welcome back to Marcus Stoinis to the 11 at his IPL home ground at the expense of Cameron Green. So those are the two changes. No Green, no Carey, and Inglis and Stoinis come in. Anil, first thoughts on especially Josh Inglis? It's a change you were seeing coming.
Yeah, it was, because Carey, we've been discussing, he seems to be out of form, and Inglis has done well to deserve this opportunity. Even in the warm-up games, he did really well, and he's someone who can certainly change the course of the game. In terms of his approach, he plays all the shots and puts pressure on the bowler. So it's a good move with Inglis coming in, and also Stoinis. The experience of Stoinis in that middle order is a welcome move for Australia.
Is it an un-Australian thing though, Tom, to make a change after the first game? If Inglis was going to play, he should probably have played in Chennai?
Yeah, it's a good point you make. It is, I suppose, something that you don't normally see with an Australian side. You normally see a side picked very early on and then backed for a long period of time. If anything, there's criticism that they have held on to certain players for too long. But I think it's the right selection. I think the reason maybe Carey was given an extended opportunity was for the fact that he's a left-hander. And if you look down that middle order of the Australian top order, it's got a lot of right-handers, or they're all right-handers. So I think that may have been the one sort of thing that he was thread that he was hanging on to. And I think the experience of Stoinis is important. Green, we all know, is a fabulous player of huge potential, but in this format, he's still finding his feet. Stoinis has been around the block many, many times in this format and other white ball formats, and has the experience, and I think Australia need that experience.
All right, well, let's have a look at the South African team as well. I'll get Dale's thoughts on the changes for Australia too, but let's just confirm the South African playing 11, and this was a team that we're wondering, will they add to their spin contingent? We'll just have a look at that in a second, but until we get there, Marcus Stoinis, there we are. So let's have a look. South Africa's 11 does see a return to the playing 11 for Tabraiz Shamshi. So it's two spinners, which is something we did expect. Gerald Coetzee missing out, and no changes outside of that. Quinton de Kock himself is also a Lucknow supergiant, so a little bit of experience on the Ekana Stadium, which will host its first ever World Cup game. But Dale, this was again on expected lines, the two spinners.
Yeah, totally expected. I think South Africa played their best team that they could play on the best batting kind of surface in Delhi, and if there was going to ever be any spinning availability on these surfaces, then Gerald Coetzee was going to be the guy that was going to miss out, and Shamsi was going to be someone to step in. I don't think Shamo is going to bat ahead of Keshav Maharaj and KG, but he'll argue he'll want to have a picture of that because he loves that kind of stuff. But yes, good change for them because both these spinners somewhat replicate what India had the other day, although it was in Chennai. Interested to see how the surface is going to play. But those memories might still haunt Australia, and hence why they've made a couple batting changes and extended their batting lineup with some senior statesmen in Marcus Stoinis and Cameron Green also missing out. So if South Africa can bowl similar lines, similar lengths on a wicket that we don't quite know what's going to play like, it will be interesting to see how Australia go about batting, because The other night, they didn't seem to have an aggressive approach. They had a good defensive approach, but they just didn't know how to get the runs going. So it'll be an epic battle today.
Yeah, we're certainly counting on it. And if we just have a look at recent form, and you saw that little stat at the bottom of your screen a little while back on how these two teams shape up head to head since 2019, and that would put a smile on any South African face. You might not value a lot of ODI cricket between World Cups these days, but 7-2 is a terrific record. In India, it's 3-0 to South Africa. In World Cups, it was made 3-2 after what turned out to be an inconsequential win for South Africa in terms of the race to the semis, but pivotal to shape the semi-finals. The order was flipped around. India played New Zealand, and the rest is history. Overall, 50-54. South Africa should hammer Australia today, shouldn't they?
I don't know. Those numbers suggest well played to South Africa. But when it comes to World Cups, like I said, there's some guys have been to World Cups and won World Cups, and they know how to deal with that pressure that comes with that occasion. South Africa have obviously beaten Australia in World Cups there, and in recent history played well against them. But it's all about today, really. Those numbers mean nothing when you come down to today. Who can access these? Who can adapt to these conditions the best? Who's going to handle the pressure the best? And that's how we're going to see a winner come out.
I know that, Tom, there was a bit of a swagger when Australia played most teams, but in particular South Africa, you almost felt, yes, you can get under their skins easier than perhaps some of the other teams, and perhaps it was because of the history that we speak of now. Has that changed in the last 3 or 4 years with this batch of players? Now they played, and the fact that South Africa enjoyed this good record, or does that mean nothing in a World Cup game?
Well, I think that swagger sort of was generated through Shane Warne and what he did to a number of the South African batters back, when he was at his prime from, sort of early 90s when South Africa were introduced back into international cricket. And, the dominance around that, I think, seemed to gather momentum. And obviously then it coincided with that great Australian side that, boasted all those greats in, McGrath, Gilchrist, Hayden, the list goes on, Warne and so on. So I think Australia are very much back to, back down to earth, and they have been for a number of years. And I think, it's a different format, but I think the incident in South Africa during the Test match with the sandpaper gate, I think that also sort of really brought Australia and that team down to earth as well. So, I don't think you're going to be seeing that type of Australian team walk out in this World Cup against South Africa with their chest pumped out and walking 10 foot tall and thinking they own the place, because they'll still walk out there knowing that they can win the contest, but they'll do it in a lot more of a humble manner.
All right, very interesting. There's so much that these two teams have had in terms of stories, as I said, on the cricket pitch in multiple formats, and it shapes perhaps how they enter this game emotionally, right? Let's talk about David Warner for a bit. Yes, Australia are bowling first, but when we talk about approaches, Anil Kumble was critical about the approach he saw against India in the opening game. So too was Tom Moody. Warner is a prolific run getter. He's on a bit of a swan song. You'd think this would be his last World Cup, and he loves playing South Africa. And I guess when you talk about individual players, if there are questions of this team, Anil, David Warner and how he starts, how long he bats, could go a long way in just setting the tone for the rest of the team. Warner looked the standout batter even in the last game?
Yes, he was one batter who showed a lot of intent. He was aggressive from the start, and when he's out there in the middle, he's always sort of trying to dictate terms, and he takes on the bowlers with his body language. He sort of needles them as well, and that's something that you don't see the other Aussies do. You've sort of literally had that going with every Australian team, but here it's only David Warner, and he showed that kind of intent on this kind of a surface. I mean, we'll have to see how it plays.
Yeah.
But if it is a bit challenging, then you need that kind of an intent. You need that kind of a body language where you say that, look, I've come here to take you on. And if the onus is on the batter versus the bowler. So David Warner is critical in this run chase for Australia, no matter how much South Africa get.
Funny enough, his numbers against South Africa's two main seamers make for interesting reading. Against Rabada and Ngidi Dale, I wonder what you make of a stat like this, where he's been dismissed 3 times in 4 innings of Ngidi with an average of 6. never been dismissed to Rabada in 9 innings, scored 185 runs at a strike rate of 130. That's funny.
Yeah. No, that's an interesting one, because when it comes to test matches, I feel like KG's got it over Warner a little bit, but in the white ball format, not so much, and does struggle against Lungi a little bit. But that's always going to be a challenging contest, that fast bowler, opening bowler against...
what do you sense Lungi's got, though, that annoys a batter like Warner, who otherwise seems pretty comfortable? Something about Lungi, the bowler, that Warner doesn't fit up to Warner's comfort zone? I
mean, he's pretty skillful, Lungi. He's quite a tall bowler, and he likes to hit the seam, which is always going to be challenging for batters. A lot of these contests would have been played in places like South Africa and Australia, where the ball does swing and seam a little bit when the ball's brand new and hard. So you're going to have your hardest challenges going to be against the opening bowlers, and then it will get easier as the ball gets older, and the spinners will become a little bit easier to face, whereas it's going to be kind of the other way around. I feel like it might be, if the surfaces are good, the best time to score is in the first few overs, and then it becomes more difficult as the spinners come into play. But we'll see how it goes tonight.
And also Ngidi, comes around the stumps and then gets that awkward angle to David Warner. He doesn't have the smoothest of actions like how a Rabada has, so perhaps that could be one of the factors as well.
All right, well, that's a conversation for the next second innings, given that Pat Cummins is going to bowl first, and this is a story that is worth that story so often today. This is going to be a conversation, and it'll be a bit of a story if Australia go down today. This is not a team that are associated with starting World Cup slowly, and there will be a spotlight on Pat Cummins. So let's talk a little bit about Pat Cummins, the captain, one of the few bowling captains that there are in international cricket. It's never easy, and his own ODI form is something we brushed upon in the last game. Tactically, we raised some questions on his use of Adam Zampa. That'll be under the scanner as well. But let's just talk a little bit about Cummins. We've got Tom Moody, we've got Dale Steyn. Anil Kumble was a bowling captain himself. So let's just understand Pat Cummins, the ODI captain, and what stops him from perhaps being the bowler he is in the longest format, and how his decision making has been. Firstly, let's talk about the challenges of being a bowling captain and whether that comes in the way of Pat Cummins' craft.
It should not. Ideally, you need to play your role as a bowler or as a batter. I mean, if you're a bowling captain, of course, your role as a bowler in the team, in the playing 11, you should sort of do that and not worry about when to come on to bowl, because Pat Cummins, obviously, with this lineup with the Australian team, he doesn't take the new ball. Perhaps that's something that he may sort of want to do, but he is not, because of Stark and Josh Hazlewood. So he needs to get used to that role of bowling first change, number one. Number two, I thought tactically, of course, we've discussed this in Chennai. Yeah, in retrospect, he probably would have realized that. Not necessary that the option of Adam Zampa coming early on in Chennai would have resulted in a win for Australia. But when the opportunity arises, you need to take that, because that was the right move at that point in time. So maybe, sometimes your bowling form affects your decision making as well. So if he gets a couple of wickets early on, you could see a different Pat Cummins on the field.
Tom, how important is this World Cup for Pat Cummins, the captain, given everything that is said already about him? Some of us were wondering whether he would be the natural ODI choice after Aaron Finch, or whether he's good with the Test captaincy mantle. Let's look at different captains for different formats, as England tend to, as most teams seem to want to go in that way. So how important is this World Cup for him as captain?
Well, it's very important for him and for Australia, as simple as that. You need, obviously, a captain on form, whether it be as a captain, tactically on form, and also with his bowling. He needs to find that form. I must admit, it is a huge workload on someone like Pat Cummins to be the Test captain, the ODI captain, and also, playing in T20 cricket and franchise cricket around the world. So he plays a lot of cricket. And I think one of the issues Pat Cummins has, and the reason he's had modest returns in this format, is down to the fact that he's quite often rested in a lot of bilateral ODIs. So he's not playing a lot of ODI cricket purely because he's either recovering from injury because of a recent Test series, or he's being rested purely because you can only bowl so many overs in high pressure cricket and travel around the world constantly. So I think that has affected his leadership, because leadership is something that you develop the skill of by doing it repetitively, and he hasn't had that repetition with his captaincy in this format. So it's just understanding the tactical timings of certain things you need to put into place as a game unfolds. And if he's not doing it regularly, you're not really, it's like anything, you're not going to be at the best of your game when it comes to those leadership skills.
Do you sense it's harder for fast bowlers as captains to stay switched on the way you'd think a batter would be switched on in the outfield, knowing full well his job really begins when the team has to chase or when the team has to bat? So when teams just fielding, you're just thinking about fields, bowlers, when I'm going to bowl when, whereas Pat has the extra responsibility of bowling himself. Do you sense it's the kind of thing that the reason why we don't see fast bowlers as captains?
Yeah, I think, generally I think it's a nice thing to have a bowler as a captain, especially when it comes to the bowling side of things, because he's already kind of worked out who's going to bowl when. He's looking at that whole 50 overs as to what periods of the game that he'll bowl. The big thing for me is that as a South African, I think if you made a fast bowler a captain, we don't kind of back ourselves more than we back our friends. So when it would be a choice between should I bowl or should somebody else bowl, I would generally probably say, no, you bowl, because that's our culture. That's just who we are. Whereas I feel like when it comes to Australia, they really do back themselves. So Pat wouldn't have that issue. It's just a culture where they feel like it's fine. If something needs to be done, I'm the guy, I'll do it. So Pat will have that in his favour. He'll feel like he'll never have that question as like, should I bowl now or should somebody else bowl? So I think it's fine. I think since probably that Sandpaper Gate situation, Australia did look at Tim Paine as being captain for a while.
Yep.
And then now they may be looking at somebody else, just to have somewhat of a different approach. Bring a bowler in, see what he can do. Pat Cummins is going to be there for a long period of time. And he's a great player as well as an experienced player. So have a look at him and see how he goes. But he has had his tactical issues sometimes have been of question. But you make that decision to give him that opportunity, and if it works, you praise him, and when it doesn't, we sit here and we say, why didn't you do this and that?
You did play under Pollock, didn't you? You did.
No, I missed Polly.
It.
Just missed Polly. Yeah.
Right. Ever spoke to him though about the challenges of being a fast bowling captain or any of that? And any observations?
Not a lot. I spoke to him a lot about bowling, and I never. I'm probably the one guy who never got an opportunity to captain South Africa from the senior players. You had JP Duminy. Mornay, who also Vernon, myself and Mornay, we were included in senior players meetings, but our opinions were never really taken too seriously. It was always AB Fuff and the guys like that.
Yeah, I can see where they rated their fast bowlers as far as what they need to do, just go and bowl fast.
Yeah, pretty much.
Don't worry about the plans. We'll figure that out. Right, but as we talk about Cummins the character, there's a lot to like about him, especially when he took over, when he did. Anil, you sense he's a great leader, but tactically, may not be as good as he is when he's leading. And that can be said about quite a few captains. I know Babar Azam falls under that scanner too. How sharp is he tactically versus leadership? Is that a challenge to find the perfect balance? Someone who's a good leader and tactically sharp?
I mean, he comes across as a statesman. I mean, whenever he's sort of spoken on certain difficult issues, he certainly comes across with clarity. And I think it's a learning curve. I mean, he's still young in his captaincy career, and like Tom mentioned, he hasn't played too much of one-day cricket, white ball cricket, so that will come as well.
Yeah.
Understanding of Indian conditions is something that he needs to also bring in his captaincy. Perhaps Adam Zampa in the 18th over in Australia would have been fine, but that's something that he needs to sort of bring in as well. That was the only thing. Otherwise, I think it's still too early for us to sort of say that tactically he was not ready. I mean, that's where you need the people who are sitting and watching as well to come in and give those inputs.
I guess the other challenge is, Tom, I know a lot of people carry this question, and I don't think it's a fair one, but they still carry it just the same, that if Sandpaper Gate hadn't happened, then there would be no doubt that Steve Smith should be the captain right now, and that almost, I'm trying to think if it still carries on in some form, consciously, subconsciously in this dressing room, when Cummins is not available and Smith captains and captains so well. And then in this same team, when Cummins, you look at decisions, you think, Steve Smith wouldn't do that. I'm just trying to think if that adds to the existing pressures and workloads of Pat Cummins.
Oh, I think it may be a shadow that's cast over him, but it was the point I was going to make about Steve Smith is just watch him in the next 50 overs when Australia's in the field, and just watch how active he is around, how his eyes are darting around the field, how he's sort of, waving his hands left, right and centre, or going up to, whether it be Pat or whether it be another senior player in the side around tactical things. Steve Smith doesn't sleep at night because he's thinking about cricket. He's constantly thinking about cricket. He is a real student of the game, and you can see when he's had his opportunities to captain, particularly since the Sandpaper Gate. You can see that he's nearly an over, if not 2 or 3 overs ahead of the game. The way he is planning ahead, he's not sort of a reactive captain. He's a very proactive captain, trying to make things happen. And I think that is the big difference between the tactical leadership styles between Pat Cummins and Steve Smith. Steve Smith is a lot more creative, where Pat will just go down a pretty standard line of approach, which has been thought out over a couple of days with all the support staff and senior players.
All right, well, we'll see how things go. One win and we could have a different sort of conversation, but keep an eye out on Pat Cummins, because this is a dangerous South African side with a number of batters in form, 3 of them coming at the back of 100 in the opening game against Sri Lanka. Let's just give you some matchups to look forward to. Quinton de Kock is out there already with Temba Bavuma, and against this Australian set of bowlers, might make for an interesting reading. If I'm sure they've discussed this, the likes of Andrew McDonald, Dan Vittori, but he averages just the 14 against Hazelwood, 7 times out of 13, dismissed 4 out of 12 against Stark, and 3 out of 4 against Maxwell. So who's going to put their hand up to bowl to Quinton de Kock today, I guess, is a question, Dale?
All of them are begging for the ball right now, aren't they? That said, too, they probably also want to stay away from him. They know that he recently just scored 100 and he can be quite devastating with the bat. But yeah, if you're playing against a team quite often, someone's going to get you out, and sometimes someone has the Mickey over you a little bit. In this case, there's been a couple guys in that Australian lineup that have done that. Yeah,
and we spoke of 3 players getting 100. Quinton was one, Markram the other, and Rassie van der Dusen did his thing, as he tends to in this format. But Heinrich Klaasen is being looked at as by many to be perhaps the breakthrough player of this tournament, or the tournament or the kind of player who will have a breakthrough tournament, or the kind of form he's been in. Against some of the Australian bowlers, he'll enjoy the matchup. Adam Zampa's threat, if neutralized, goes a long way in you getting the better of this Australian ODI side. And he's got a strike rate of 130 there. Good numbers against Steyn too. And from what you've seen of Heinrich Klaasen, is that a fair assessment that this could be kind of World Cup where he just wins you 3 or 4 games of his bat?
Yeah, you'd think that in the World Cup there's going to be 2 games that he'll take for himself. That's what you think with your back players. You kind of back them. In 2020, you also sometimes buy players knowing that in the season they're going to win you 2 games when it matters most. And Heinrich Klaasen is one of those guys that he'll just do that. The problem is that he lives by the sword and dies by the sword. So he takes on the spinners really well. He'll score at an extremely high strike rate. But at the same time, he can get out to them playing the same shots that earn him success. So that contest between him and Adam Zampa today is going to be quite a big one, and a very important period there for South Africa in those middle overs. Because if you lose Heinrich Klaasen and you've got David Miller to bat with Janssen and the tail, it can become quite a long tail. So Klaasen, if he's in, might have to just extend that innings of his a little bit longer.
Yeah. I mean, Temba Bavuma's out there as well. One player who missed out on a day where everyone cashed in. He's had a good record this year. Temba Bavuma is in form. But you sense he's always going to be the kind of player that you also put under the scanner if he has a couple of failures. The South African captain has had a good year of it, so we'll wait to see how things go. I've given Anil Kumble the luxury of actually watching a few balls to see if that surface looks good enough. There's a groundsman whose job might be at stake.
Yeah, it's too early. Right? Bounds look even, and you're hoping that the surface should be good for a good game of cricket. You don't want it to sort of play the way it played in the IPL. So yeah, the couple of balls that Mitchell Stark has bowled, it looks like there's carry and it's coming on nicely to the bat. Hopefully it should remain like that.
300 plus?
Yeah, close to that. It's a big ground.
Yes.
So it's not a small boundary. So that's where I think Zampa will also probably enjoy, because you have slightly bigger outfields to play with.
I mean, reluctantly on our recorded preview yesterday, Tom, Anil and Dale both said South Africa favourites. Do you echo that sentiment? Can I actually not hear you? Are you pretending right now? Okay, I couldn't hear you, so that's brilliant. I think you said something awesome, but we couldn't hear you. Tom, are you still with us? No, we can't hear you. We can't hear you. All right, no problem, Tom. No problem. I'm going to cut it.
We got the message.
Why don't we have some fun? Why don't you tell me the score in sign language? Just sort of how many do you think they're going to get? 2, 3, 0. Okay, this is just not working. I was hoping this works. Why don't you just tell me if you think South Africa are favourites? Yes or no? You know what? I actually like this format. I'm going to try this for everything that we have here for. Thank you, Tom Moody. But yeah, I can hear Anil and Dale. So yeah, 300 plus is Anil, Dale, Steyn.
Yeah, I think if this wicket plays good, yeah, I'm also going to go just over 300. I'll say between 310 and 320. And then South Africa to try and bowl Australia out for.
Brilliant. Yes, of course you did. I didn't ask you for that prediction. But yeah, thank you very much to Tom Moody, Anil Kumble and Dale Steyn. We'll get this man's voice back on by the end of the South African innings, and Anil and Dale will be with us too. So look forward to your company then on Maruti Suzuki Arena Presents ESPN Cricket for Matchday. Download the mobile app if you haven't already. Small matter of India-Pakistan in less than 48 hours from now. We can't wait for that one. And this, of course, promises to be a real cracker. So we'll have all the news and updates around the World Cup on the ESPN Cricket for mobile app. See you at the end of the innings.
Stunning looks, then swift,